Hey everybody, this is Robert. Welcome back to my channel. I decided I wanted to do kind of a year in review, but I wanted to do it maybe a little bit differently from what some people have done. Rather than give you my list of the top 10 books of the year or favorite 5 or whatever, I decided I would just go through the books that I gave 5 stars to this year. A couple of pointers about my star system is that I don't rate classics. So I read a lot of classics this year that would be 5-star books. But since I don't assign them ratings, I won't be talking about classics here. But I have read, probably by the end of this next week, I'll have read somewhere between 125 and 130 books. And I've only had 8 books that I've given 5 stars to. So that's only 7 or 8%. I'm probably a little bit more generous than some people are. And I'm a believer in the bell curve. The problem is the bell curve on my Goodreads is going to be very skewed because I don't have a lot of 1- and 2-star books. But that's because I'm not reading books randomly. I'm pretty careful in selecting the books that I want to read. So naturally, more of them are going to be 3, 4, and 5 than would be 1 and 2. So the usual 10% at the top end and 10% at the bottom end doesn't really hold true. Although I'm pretty close to 10% on the top end, so I'm pretty happy with that. All of these are fiction this year. I read a lot of nonfiction and I enjoyed a lot of it, but none of them creeped over the edge of being 5 stars instead of 4 stars. So I'll be talking about 8 novels this time. And I'll just do them in the order that I read them because I'm not going to try to rank them. The first one that I had as a 5-star reading was Chloe Benjamin's The Immortalists. And everybody knows about this book. It's been around for a long time. It's the story of 4 siblings who go to a fortune teller when they're bored one summer day. And the fortune teller tells them individually, each of them, what the date of their death will be. And that's all. Doesn't say anything about how or where they'll be or anything. And so the rest of the book is the stories of the 4 children as they approach that day. And a lot of the book is discussing how people's lives are affected by that knowledge. First of all, do they believe it? Second of all, does it change the way they live their lives? And I thought it was a fascinating read. I know there's some people who haven't cared for it, but I think it's a wonderful read. Right now, it's actually one of the 2 finalists in my school's literary prize, the Mako Prize. The second one I read is probably not a literary award winner, but I found it just completely charming, and that is Rachel Joyce's The Music Shop. It's the story of a man who, when his mother dies and leaves him her home, the main thing she leaves him is with a love of vinyl records and music. And he decides that even though the world is heading into CDs at this time, he is going to open a record shop and only sell vinyl. And it's about the story of his shop, and it's also about the story of a woman who comes to the shop and is starting to become a regular visitor, and they have a relationship. And so I found it completely charming and not your typical romantic comedy at all, but I found their relationship touching, and I loved, of course, the references to classical music. The third 5-star read I had was Kristin Hannah's The Great Alone. Now, if you're a follower of Adam at Memento Mori, he dismissed this book as mommy-lit. And I have a feeling that there are lots of mommies out there who love this book who would probably take issue with that. I take issue with that. It's the story of a family from Seattle. The father comes back from the Vietnam War and has classic PTSD. And he's so paranoid, he so wants to get away from the government and anything that the government is involved in, that he moves his family to a very remote place in Alaska. And it's about the life that they build in Alaska, not knowing anything about what they're getting into. And I just found it a fascinating drama. It's everything in this book. If you like historical fiction, if you like family dramas, this is one that you should read. The fourth one is also a really popular title. It seems like most of the books that I'm having on this list are really popular this year. The fourth one is Madeline Miller's first book, The Song of Achilles. I also read Circe, but I actually like the Song of Achilles better. And it's the retelling of the Trojan War, focused on the relationship between Achilles and his best friend, almost raised as his brother, Patroclus. And it's a fascinating retelling. Madeline Miller keeps a little bit of the tone of the Homeric epic, but she does it in such a way that it's not off-putting at all to a modern reader. Whether you know the story of the Trojan War or not, you'll be able to read and follow this novel. It's just, I think, brilliantly done, and I raced through it. I could not put it down. And that's probably one of my 2 co-favorites of the year, is the Song of Achilles. The 5th title is a backlist title. It's a 20th century novel, Jane Smiley's 1,000 Acres. And this is actually a reread for me. I read it many years ago, and then I reread it this year as part of my look back at backlist titles. And I just found it even better this time than I did the first time. If you're familiar with Shakespeare's King Lear, it is essentially King Lear set on a modern Midwestern farm. An older farmer splits up his farm among his children, and chaos ensues. And it follows that progression of relationships among the different family members. And I just thought Jane Smiley did a marvelous job of retelling that King Lear story. The 6th one is a little bit of an unusual title for me because I don't really care that much about celebrities. I don't care that much about Hollywood. But this novel captured something in me that I really enjoyed. And it's Taylor Jenkins Reid's The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And I don't know exactly why, but I found this a fascinating story. It's about a young woman who is very poor and wants to go to Hollywood and will do anything it takes to become successful. And she becomes the most successful movie star in Hollywood. And it talks about the different husbands that she has, and also the other relationships with actors and actresses that are either friends, adversaries, or whatever. I just found it utterly captivating, and I'm not even really sure why. The next one is actually a work in translation. The 7th one is Kyung-Sook Shin's The Court Dancer. And I found this book through Matthew Sharapa's video about it. He claims that she's his favorite author. And he had an interview with the English translator, Anton Her, on his channel. And I watched that, and I discovered that it was about the time of Korean history that I'm writing. And so I had to read it just for the atmosphere and the background of an actual Korean writer writing about this period. And it's a terrific story. It's set in the late 19th century. It's about the most famous dancer at Korea's court in Seoul, and a love affair of sorts that she has with the French ambassador. And so it goes back and forth between Seoul to Paris and then back to Seoul. But I just found the story fascinating, not just because it's an area of history that I'm currently researching, but I just thought the story was really compelling, and I thought that the translation of it was just stunningly beautiful. And then the 8th and final 5-star read I had this year is my other co-favorite of the year. And it's a book I almost didn't pick up because it didn't seem like the kind of book I wanted to read. But it's Delia Owens' book, Where the Crawdads Sing. Now, this is a story that goes back into the 50s about a little girl named Kaya. It starts when she's 7. And she's living in eastern North Carolina in the marshlands. And so they're off the grid, if you can call it that. Back in the 50s and 60s, there really wasn't the same grid. But in short order, all of her family leaves the family home, and she's stuck there with her father until her father eventually leaves. And so Kaya is left as a young child to fend for herself, and it's her story as she grows up. And then it also has a mystery story, and you learn this right at the very beginning of the book. A young man that Kaya knows, and in fact Kaya has dated, shows up dead. And so there's a mystery story, and Kaya is accused of the crime because she's a big outsider in the community, and so she's suspicious to everybody. And it's a fascinating, page-turning, literary mystery that doesn't get solved until the absolute final page of the book, and it keeps you guessing. I did not see the ending coming that came. And so I just think it's a wonderful read, and the more I think about it, the more I like it. I'll probably have to go back and reread this one. Delia Owens also wrote some nonfiction books with, I'm assuming it was her husband, Mark Owens, at the time, including one called Cry of the Kalahari, which I had read years ago and thought was fascinating. And I picked up this novel not making that connection between Cry of the Kalahari and Delia Owens until after I got into it. And it makes sense because her writing about natural things is just stunning. So those are the 8 books that I gave 5 stars to. As I mentioned, Where the Crawdads Sing and The Song of Achilles are probably my 2 most favorite books this year. And I'm probably not going to make a video about the books that I really dislike this year. It's easy for me to rant, and sadly from my analytics, the videos where I've ranted have been the ones that have gotten the most views, but I'm not sure that's a good thing. And I don't want to be that negative at the end of the year. So I'm going to leave it with just the positive books this year. I'll be back again on Friday with my Friday reads, the last Friday reads of 2018. And I may sneak in one more video talking about my plans for 2019 before New Year's Eve. We'll see. I'm not sure if I'll get to that one or not. I can always do that in early January. It won't make any difference. Okay, everybody, whatever holidays you're celebrating, I hope they're enjoyable for you. And I will talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.